Hey, y'all, welcome to season 2, episode 8, the Peace Podcast. Just give me the ability to give up, whatever that looks like. So, if you are in a space where you're in a relationship or you're in a situation and you have exhausted all of the tenacity that you have to give, you really have said, you know what, I'm going to keep trying, I'm going to keep doing, I'm going to keep being. And in the trying and the doing and the being, you aren't making any leeway or getting anywhere. This episode is for you. And so, I try to give you episodes that come from personal experience, give you episodes that um, share my story so that perhaps it helps you. So I would love for you to like and subscribe to the page and share with your friends so that they can hear the stories and maybe it will connect with them and get them out of a space that they're in. And as I always tell you, when you're in these spaces and I share my stories, it's not autobiographical or about me. It really is about knowing that we go through our situations so that we can share those situations with other people so that other people may have hope and experience a different reality while they're in those situations because they see that other people have been through them and gotten to the other side. And so when we're thinking about the ability to give up, one of the things that we really have to do is see the situation for what it is. And I know that when we're inside of the situation, a lot of times we try to give people the benefit of the doubt. We try to give them attributes that they don't really have, and we give them grace and empathy. And all of those are great qualities to have inside of you. But what happens when you're in a space where you're giving people all the grace and you're exhausting all of your efforts and you just can't make any leeway? I think about how, I share stories about my kids all the time. And I think about how, oftentimes when you have a younger child, they try really hard to do the thing. So the Legos are the thing for my 6-year-old. And so he brings home this packet of Legos that he got at school for Valentine's Day, and somehow he lost the instructions. So we have these Legos that are different colors, and we don't know what they're supposed to make. There's no picture, and he's frustrated because he's sitting there and he's trying to make something out of these Legos, and he doesn't have any instructions and he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be making. So he becomes frustrated. And I, remember saying to him, well, it's kind of hard when you don't have instructions. And sometimes you just have to either get creative or give up on what it is that you're trying to do because you just can't do without direction. So, we Google and we do all of these other things. And isn't that true of us sometimes too? Like we have all these pieces and we know the pieces can fit together and we perhaps know where they go, but we're in relationship or we're with people who no matter what we do to finagle those pieces together, it's just not going to end up being the situation that we want it to be. And, oftentimes we think that that's all in our control, and it's not, especially when it's a relationship, because you're in a relationship with someone else. So they have to be willing to put in the effort and get creative and do those things as well. You can realize that someone has trauma. You can realize where their trauma came from. You can give them empathy for the spaces that their trauma exists in. But that doesn't mean that you can heal their trauma. And I have a friend who, was talking about his marriage therapy. And one of the things that the therapist did that I thought was amazing, because not very many therapists who are working on a marriage will do this. But the therapist said, I think the two of you need to do individual therapy before you can come together and work on this marriage or do this relational therapy. And one of the things that made come to life to me was, if you're not working on your own stuff, then how are you going to work on the marriage as its entity? How are you going to work on the relationship as its entity if you're not working on things that you are bringing to the marriage because of your trauma? So if you're someone like me who's super empathetic and you want to understand someone's why, you oftentimes will tell yourself that knowing their why is going to help you to help them. And yes, that may be true. And also, they have to want to help themselves. And so knowing someone's trauma and knowing their why and understanding the reason that they're doing the things they're doing doesn't mean that you now have the capacity at which to heal them. They have to want to do that for themselves. They have to want to connect with God and get a vision for who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to get to that space. So, one of the things that you'll realize when you're in a space where you're deciding whether to give up because it's time to make that decision, one of the things you'll notice is that your forcing and your controlling won't change the outcome. So, you saying, here's an ultimatum, if you do this, then this, you're not in full control of this situation. So, that's not going to change the outcome. I've had situations where I've wanted to like broach a topic with someone, and it could be professionally, it can be in relationship with a partner, and I've asked myself, like, what's my intended outcome with having this conversation? And once I get to the intended outcome, I'll say, but does this person have the capacity at which to resolve this to get to that intended outcome? Because I can bring something to you a million times over. And if you don't have the capacity for us to come together to get to this outcome, then my outcome isn't going to be achieved. So I have to think about who's the source that I'm bringing this to, and do they have the capacity at which to make a change or move this? And if they don't, then there really isn't a point in broaching the subject. I have to make a decision or a choice within me. So no matter how many times you bring them the podcast, no matter how many times you send them the reel, no matter how many times you show them that meme or have them listen to or read something that you've gained knowledge from, if they don't have the capacity at which to change that thing, then it's not going to change. There's no amount of effort that you can put in to change the situation that's going to result in them changing. And I remember my last relationship, and if you're in this space, I wholeheartedly can empathize with you. But I remember my last relationship asking for him to be gentle when he was angry. I remember saying, you're not angry at me, because it would be something that he was angry about at work or something he was angry about in his familial system. And I remember saying, like, well, you're not angry at me, so why are you acting angrily toward me? And giving him some of the things that I had learned about, how you assess your feelings and how everything doesn't have to end up in anger, etc. And even with that knowledge, when he got angry, he had to have some place to release it. And I ended up being the resting place for that. And so no matter how much I forced or try to control or did things that would teach him the skills to operate inside of that space without being angry with me, until he wanted to fix it, that I wasn't going to change it. So I had to give up the idea of, if I give him enough information, if I give him enough um, of the knowing that I have, if I tell him enough about the emotions that it's causing me, perhaps he'll be able to change this thing. But that was me trying to control the situation, because the reality is I should have only had to tell him that thing one time for him to be like, okay, she's not about this life. She's not about to put up with me taking this out on her. So I need to fix this thing. And I'm not saying that everybody should just fix something immediately as soon as you tell them. But when it comes to things like being verbally abusive, or when it comes to things like, acting out of character to this person or taking out things on them, etc., like, it really should only take one time for you to be like, I don't really think that's going to sit well with me. So I'm going to need you to do something about it, because I can't be in a relationship where this is existing. But you can't control it, right? Like, your tenacity will never get you to a place where you can force that person to change, move, or be something that's going to be a different outcome for you. And something else that we need to realize when we're in a space where we're deciding, do we give up or do we stay, is that if you're not happy in the space, then you're really taking someone else's spot. So if you're not happy in your job, there's somebody out there that's their dream job. So you're taking their spot by filling it in your misery when someone else may really want that spot. And you also have a place that you're supposed to be, but you're staying in a place in the name of tenacity, in the name of giving your best effort and continuing to be in a place because you don't want to give up. The same thing is true in a relationship, right? There might be somebody who comes into that space and this person is everything they've been looking for. And actually, when I end relationships, like I hope that for the person. I hope they heal, grow, and shift into the person that is their perfect semblance of their self that makes their relationship with their next partner amazing. And I know that it also takes growth to get there to where you're in a healthy space. That person isn't for me. And so for me to sit in that space and stay there and be unhappy and be miserable, but continue to push and shift and try to move that person into the person that I want them to be is really me just taking up a space that wasn't intended for me and actually is someone else's. And if you're like me and you're like my 6-year-old and you think that you can somehow maneuver the pieces together so it'll turn into this outcome that you think it's supposed to be, it's not going to happen because it's not your space to be filling. And no matter how hard you try, you're not going to make a situation something that it shouldn't be with you in it. And sometimes that's really hard for us to accept because we want to think that we're the best partner for whoever this person is. We're the best person to fill this role. We have the best credentials or skills to be in this space. And oftentimes that's just not true. And sometimes we just need to say, you know what, I'm giving up on this because it's not for me. And I know that if it were for me, it wouldn't be this way. I know that what God has for me is something completely different than this. And he wouldn't have put those desires in my heart if it was supposed to be like this. And the last thing that happens is you stall your own progress, right? So if you're in a space that you're not supposed to be in, if you're with a person that you're not supposed to be with, those desires of your heart don't go away. And if that person isn't willing to grow with you, then you're going to stay in the space that you're in. Like that is the reality of the situation. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. And so, in an effort to get yourself to the place that you're supposed to be in, to progress into the area of growth that you're supposed to see, you have to stop stalling because you're staying there thinking, if I stay a little longer, this is going to change. If I push a little harder, this is going to change. If I do a little more, this is going to change. But you've pushed harder, you've changed, you've moved, you've done everything that you know how to do. You've even learned more to build your capacity and craftsmanship, to be able to try to do more inside of that space. And you've come to the same result. And that's because you can't, in spaces where relationship has to exist for things to move, you can't do it all on your own. So you're never going to be enough, do enough, change enough, read enough to stop stalling your progress, because what you have, the gifts that you have, the knowledge that you have, the wisdom that you hold, the lessons that you've learned here are actually meant for the space that you're supposed to be in. But because you think you can force it and you're taking up someone else's space, you're stalling your own progress by staying where you are instead of saying, you know what, what's meant for me is beyond this space. And I'm going to take everything I have right now and I'm going to take it into that space because it's going to enable my progression. It's going to push me into a new space. And again, I know this because I've lived it. I know it because when I was sitting in a relationship where I knew I wasn't fulfilled, I could also tell that the person wasn't fulfilled. I also knew that I was never going to be what he wanted me to be. And instead of shape shifting and molding myself like clay into this other version of me and being resentful and feeling like I was never enough because I wasn't enough as my own self, I should have just said, you know what? You're not happy in this. I'm not happy in this. So I've done what work I know how to do. And I don't really know that you've done what work you know how to do, but maybe you're not willing to do work. But the way that it is right now is not working for either one of us. So that's data telling me that you need to move to whatever your next is, and I need to move to whatever my next is. And that is not giving up on the dream of that job or the dream of that relationship or the dream of having something that has been a desire of my heart. It's giving up on doing it here. It's giving up on doing it in this space. It's knowing that whatever needed to serve me and whatever lesson I needed to learn in this space has been learned. And now it's time to give up and move on. I know people who've left their corporate position to go explore and bring to fruition their entrepreneur dreams. And it has flourished and blossomed, and they're doing amazing work. But it took them years to say, I'm going to leave this space to go to that space. And a lot of that was fear, but a lot of it was, if I continue to stay here, I can force this into being what is for me. If I continue to stay here, I can be what they need me to be. But even in those spaces, even in that entrepreneurship role, coming to this amazing job and taking this person to their next in their amazing space, they obviously had to have a plan because they had to pay bills. We have to do that. But they knew that they were taking up someone else's space. Someone else was supposed to be in that role. They knew that they were stalling their own progression. And once they had the plan and they moved, they realized this is where I was supposed to be all along. And so today I would just encourage you to think about, what are those spaces that you are forcing yourself into? What are those spaces where you don't have the directions, but you have the Legos, and you know that if you just went to a place with the same qualities, those same tools, those same Legos, that you would be able to build a masterpiece? And whatever those spaces are, think about if you've tried everything you know and you're up against somebody who's not willing to do any work to get to the next phase. When are you willing to throw in the towel and say, this is not me giving up on what I know is a vision and a truth for my life. It's me giving up on it in this space, with this person, in this situation. And me knowing and trusting that God is going to bring me that thing, bring me what I know He's told me is for me in a new space with someone new who is willing to do the work to bring this together the way that it's supposed to be. Because giving up is not failure. Staying in a space where you're not supported, staying in a space where you're not celebrated, staying in a space where every day you're racking your brain about who you need to become to be better in that space and never getting results is a hamster wheel that's not going to take you to any sort of progression that you deserve and that your life deserves. And so I just hope that for you today. I encourage you to really think about those things. Think about all the work that you've done to get yourself to a new outcome in that space. And think about how much more that work would serve you in the space that's supposed to be for you. Thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate you. Remember, you can look me up on all social media sites. Remember to go to my website. Remember, you can like and share and subscribe those pages. DM me if you want direct access to me. And also, I've shared my PDF on those checklists to peace, so you can find steps to get you there. Remember that your peace is yours to create, right? You accept God's peace for your life, but then also you do the things to create that in your own. And staying in a space that isn't for you isn't in any way creating that peace. In fact, it's keeping you in chaos and taking up the space that someone else might find peace in because you're afraid to go to your progress in your next. So I encourage you to do that. I appreciate you for listening, and I will see you guys again next week.